Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the political spectrum and political ideology so that you can better understand what it is, better understand what ideology you are most closely associated to, so that eventually you can declare your political party for the legislative semester. So let's get started. A political spectrum is a tool used to visually compare different political positions by placing the positions on one or more axes. The one that we most often use in this class and also in the United States will be a single axis where you have the left way over on the left side and the right way over on the right side. Um, and basically, the further you are away, so if somebody places themselves way over here on the left and somebody else places themselves way over here on the right, the further they are from each other on that axis, the more different their political beliefs and political views would be. And then somebody in the center, right, would kind of have some aspects of the left, some aspects of the right within their political ideology. So let's talk about this a little bit more so we have a good understanding of what exactly this is and how we use it as a tool in politics. So most commonly, the political spectrum tells us two main things: how much change in government a person is willing to allow, right, and how fast they want that change to happen, and how much the government should actually intervene or be involved in the lives of people, particularly when that comes to the economy, right? So some of you are going to think, you know what? I think the government should just be around to basically keep things the way they are. Others may say, no, the government is to make our society change with the times. Um, and when we talk about intervening, some would say, you know what? The government is there to help support businesses or the economy when they're struggling. And others would say, no, that is not the government's job to get involved in the economy. So let's figure out what you are. So what are some general assumptions when we look at the political spectrum? A few big things. If you are more on the left side of the political spectrum, you're going to think that government should be more involved, that they should get more, that they should intervene in the private business of businesses and the economy and individuals. And they think that this should actually happen fairly quickly. Now, depending on how far left you are, that may be a gradual thing. But if you're even further left, if you're way over to that arrow side of the left, you might want some change and you want change now. If we're on the right side of the political spectrum, you're more apt to believe that the government should not be getting involved in our personal lives and our personal business and that sort of thing. And in general, you want little to no change to the status quo. In other words, you like the way things are. You don't necessarily think that because some things in society are changing, the government should change with it. We'll talk about some of those examples later on. So let's look a little bit more. In general, on the left side of the political spectrum, we are looking at what we call the liberal beliefs. The right side of the political spectrum, we're looking at what we call conservative beliefs. So, liberals, or the left side of the political spectrum, is kind of a political idea or view that is based on the belief of progress and considers the government as a critical instrument for removing social problems. So if there's an issue going on in our country, liberals would say, you know what, it's the government's job to intervene and take control of this. They believe that government's good, that it can make meaningful progress and change, and that they're there to make people more equal because inequality is inherently bad. Conservatives look at this very differently. Conservatives are going to say, you know, political idea that it's a political idea or view that is based in the belief of respect and respecting traditional institutions, respecting the power of personal freedom for individuals and citizens to make their own choice. They oppose changing the way of life that has been established already. Essentially, conservatives tend to believe that individuals are good, right? And they don't need the government telling them what to do. So less government, the better. If the government's continually changing, it'll confuse the people, and that the government doesn't really need to change on a regular basis. They believe instead that people should have freedom, people should have the ability to make their own choices without having the government getting involved. So let's look at our next one here. So a little bit more, right? On the left side, basically, if you are a left-minded person or leaning left politically on the left of the political spectrum, or you're more of a liberal, you probably support change in society and government intervention to create equality. If you're on the right side, you most likely believe that people should hold traditional values, that things should stay the same, that the government shouldn't get involved, and that society will change when society is ready. They don't need the government to change society for them. Now, if we look at the political spectrum in a little bit more detail, you're not only just on the right or the left. The further you are away from the middle, the more liberal you are, or the more conservative you are. So a moderate is somebody who's kind of in the middle. They see both sides. Depending on the issue, they might be left. On some issues, they might be right. If they are left, they're a liberal. If they're very left, they're a radical, what we call a radical liberal, that they take it to a whole nother level of government intervention and the size of government. On the right side, you'd be a conservative, but if you're way over on the edge, if you're super conservative, you're going to be what we call a reactionary conservative. So let's talk about these in a little bit more detail. Our radical liberals. These are the people that are far left on the political spectrum. They called for wide, sweeping, rapid change in the basic structure of our political, social, and economic system. And in a lot of times, they're willing to resort to extreme methods to bring about change, which in some cases, in extreme cases, could be violence or revolution. We don't often see super radical people in the United States, but when we do, sometimes violence breaks out. Liberal would be a more moderate version of the radical liberal, right? They do believe that the government should be actively involved in promoting social welfare and making our citizens more equal. But however, they call to do it peacefully. They call to do it over time, that it can't just happen like that or violence will erupt. They need to do it within the existing laws, within the existing political systems. And they reject that violent revolution or way of thinking that a radical liberal might want to do. Then we have moderates, right? Moderates, as I mentioned before, tend to share viewpoints with both liberals and conservatives, and it could be very dependent upon the issue. You might be a liberal when it comes to gun rights. You might be a conservative when it comes to LGBTQ issues. Moderates tend to be more tolerant of other people's views because they themselves go back and forth on the political spectrum, depending on the issue being discussed. Oftentimes, they don't hold extreme views on many issues. They tend to be able to see both sides. And they definitely would advocate for a go slow or a wait and see approach to social and political change. Let's just see what happens. And if it naturally starts to change, they'd be okay with that. Then we have our conservatives over here on the right side. They favor keeping things the way they are, right? As I mentioned before, maintaining the status quo. They are usually hesitant or extremely cautious about adopting new policies, especially when they don't really see a policy being broke in the first place. They like to make sure that change is happening only if absolutely necessary. They feel that less government, the better, right? So they're not often trying to solve problems with creating more government institutions or government spending. They're looking for ways to give people more freedom and solving problems by having less government rather than more. And then way on the right side, we have our reactionary conservatives. They are far right on the political spectrum. They want to actually go backwards in terms of the way we do things, both socially, economically, whatever it may be. They want to go back to the good old days and are often willing to use more extreme methods to do that as well. They will use power, right? They will use repressive types of tools in order to achieve their goals. And just like the radicals, they're willing to kind of win at all cost once you get to become more way out on the outside of the political spectrum. So in general, our political spectrums loosely form our political parties. So basically, the people on the left side of the political spectrum, or the liberals, tend to be our Democrats. And the people on the right side of the political spectrum, or the conservatives, tend to be our Republicans. Within parties, there are people often who hold a variety of opinions, however, on social and economic issues that fall along the spectrum of political ideologies, right? So you might have a liberal Democrat, you could have a moderate Democrat, moderate Republican, conservative Republican, and even your moderate Republicans or conservative Republicans might have a liberal view here or there on specific issues. An example would be a moderate Democrat who believes that all people should be able to carry a concealed weapon, right? That would be them crossing over into the right side. So currently, what are some of the big issues and where do they fall? When it comes to gun issues, the left tends to be more like for gun control, whereas the right side, or the conservatives, would be more pro-Second Amendment. When it comes to abortion, the right side would be pro-life, meaning that they believe, life starts at conception and that abortion should be minimized or completely illegal in some cases. Whereas on the left, they're going to be more pro-choice, that it should be left up to the women to make their own decision about whether or not to have an abortion. As far as some other social issues on the left, they believe that there shouldn't be censorship, that when it comes to the press or when it comes to movies, they should be able to basically produce and show whatever information they want. They believe that prisons should be used to rehabilitate, not necessarily used to punish, just like the conservatives would have. They're pro-privacy. They don't want the government using technology to read emails or listen on phone calls, those sorts of things. They believe that illegal immigrants should get amnesty. In other words, that they should be able to stay here and not be deported if they're already here. And they are huge supporters of public schools and want to see more funding to public schools. On the right side, anti-flag burning, they believe that's unpatriotic. And even though they believe in free speech, they think that this is something that should be a little bit more regulated and censored. They believe that prisons are there to punish, not to rehabilitate, that you are going to prison because you committed a crime. And this is your punishment. This is your consequence. And hopefully you learn from that. They want to limit illegal immigration. And most likely, if there were illegal immigrants here in the United States, they would be more for deportation of those immigrants. And they believe that our borders should be more closed down. And when it comes to school issues, they say the issue isn't necessarily in the funds, it's with how schools use the funds. So they want to give individuals the choice to go to different schools. For example, if you don't like Stock Prairie, you would be welcome to open enroll at Baraboo. In class, we are going to talk about some of these issues more specifically. So we'll talk about distribution of wealth, the economy, business regulation, social problems, taxation, religion, foreign affairs, and scope of government. And we will look into what the left believes and what the right believes. So make sure you've taken some notes as you went along, and we will talk more about these things in class in a to come day. Have a good day. We'll see you later.